Hello, everybody, and welcome to our MassLive High School Sports Football State Championship Preview Show. My name is Gage Nutter, and I'm going to be your host for tonight. We have a great Saturday. It's going to be 2 games on Thursday, 2 on Friday, and 4, you get a bang for your buck, 4 on Saturday. I'm going to be there all day, all 3 days. So I'm basically going to be living in the basement of Gillette Stadium, ready to go for all these high school football games. I'm looking forward to them and looking forward to breaking them down. And although I do like to think I know everything, every once in a while I don't. So for the next hour, we're going to be bringing in some reporters from across the state that have been covering all of these teams, whether it be the South Shore, the North Shore, Metro West, all over the place, Central Mass. We're going to have reporters on from the Worcester Telegram, Patriot Ledger, Boston Herald, Boston Globe, and others to break down these games. So really looking forward to it. Will there be new champions? Is Norwell going to win their first ever state championship, their first appearance in a few decades, 10, 20 years? Is Zavarian, are they going to win their third straight in Division I? Can they get it done? They just got it done against Prep last week on Thanksgiving. Can they do it twice in 2 weeks, beating the Eagles? We'll soon find out. Will West Boylston, the dynasty of the Lions and Coach Mike Ross, are they going to add another one to the trophy case in Central Massachusetts? Are they going to win a fourth straight? We'll soon find out. And speaking of the Lions and West Boylston and their quest for another state championship, I want to start with the real football in Division 8 before we get the ball rolling downhill and get into the other divisions. And to do that, we need to bring in the experts that I've so expertly scheduled to come on today's show. We got Tommy Cassell from the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, and we got Chris McDaniel from the Patriot Ledger, and all else other places there on the South Shore. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. As I mentioned, again, I'm familiar with the Lions of West Boylston, obviously very familiar with Randolph, the other team that's going to be competing at Gillette for a Division 8 title. But I wanted to bring in the experts. So just to kind of set the table here, I know Thanksgiving was last week, but leftovers are still there. So if we're going to use that metaphor, set the table for a moment, gentlemen. Randolph, the number 4 seed, they're undefeated. West Boylston, 9-2, they're the number 3 seed. It's not deja vu. I believe this is a rematch of last year's state championship as well in this division. As I mentioned at the top, West Boylston, they weren't happy with 1 or 2 or 3. They're going for 4 now. The double wing offense has been working well for Coach Ross and the Lions, as it always has. They're back in the championship game. And then Randolph, a program who some years ago, I think it was 2021, you'd probably remember better, Chris. I think they were a double-digit seed, and they went on a run, won that state championship. So it doesn't matter if Randolph's the 1 seed or the 16 seed. They always have a chance. So I want to start with you, Tommy, just talking about West Boylston and this program, really the gold standard in this division, really one of the sort of gold standard programs when it comes to consistency across the entire state. But when it comes to this year's team, just looking at these numbers they've been putting up in the postseason, 42-8 over Bartlett in the first round, 41-20 over Bourne in the next round. And then they played Lee in the semifinals, who looked like one of the best teams in Western Mass, definitely the best team in the Berkshires this year, and they beat them by 20. So I'm sure these last few years, these West Boylston teams, they've always been different. There's always a little different element to them that makes them special. But with what you've seen from the Lions this year, Tommy, what sort of jumps out to you about them this year?
Well, I think when you start with West Boylston, yeah, you already mentioned him, but Coach Mike Ross is a good jumping off point. He's won 6 Super Bowls, 2 at North High, 1 at Grafton, now 3 in a row for the Lions. And he's, like you mentioned, brought the double wing offense over to the Lions. They've had a strong history of running over there at West Boylston. And I wrote about it all year long, but the Lions do run on Renzoni. So Dominic Renzoni is a senior captain, running back. He leads Central Mass in rushing yards, has 37 rushing TDs, is knocking on the door for school records and state and Central Mass records going to last game. So with that double wing offense and a good offensive line, Coach Ross is kind of riding Renzoni and a couple other running backs to another trip to Gillette Stadium.
Yeah, it is one of those systems with the double wing. You can have the big guys up front, but you can also have maybe smaller guys or maybe more agile on the offensive line. It's all about angles and attacking angles, and that's something West Boylston does really well. And if you have a running back or two that knows how to just put your hand on the guard, put your hand on the tackle, and follow him to pay dirt, good things are going to happen. Obviously, don't get behind the sticks either. That's not going to be too helpful, but West Boylston seems to be doing all the right things. But if they want to add that next trophy, that other trophy, they're going to have to do it against a program like Randolph, which we said, they're very familiar with. Coach John Marshall and his staff have become a gold standard in this division for consistency as well. In addition to West Boylston, if we're just looking at their postseason scores for Randolph, 45-6 over Oxford in the first round, 49-13 over Hoosick Valley, and then they took down the number 1 seed, Neshoba Valley Tech, 20-12 in the semifinal round. So, Chris, as you mentioned at the top, Randolph, a team that you've seen, they're in your coverage area. They're these last few years a team that's pretty used to going to Gillette. Like we mentioned last year, they were here, fell to the Lions 22-16. But what about, I guess, this year's group as it relates to Randolph? What jumps out to you about these guys here in 2025?
Well, for Randolph, this whole season, which has been their best season in decades, it's the first time they've been undefeated in the regular season in this century. Their first league title since 1982. This all really started last year, about a year ago, when they lost to West Boylston. They had a lot of juniors and sophomores on that team who were big contributors, and right after that game, it was kind of immediately like we have to get back here. And this season has kind of all been about redemption for Randolph. And as they've always been, since John Marshall took over, they've always been one of those contenders in Division 8, but they really ramped up what they've been able to accomplish this year by winning a really tough South Shore League. They beat Cohasset, who we're going to talk about a little bit more in a couple of minutes here in the Division 7 Super Bowl. They beat Mashpee, who at the time was ranked the number 1 team in Division 7. So this is a team who's really battle tested, and they've really had a different level of success. I think a couple of years ago when they went to that Super Bowl and they won it as the number 10 seed, as kind of the surprise team, there was, that was a big surprise. And since then, the standard has really changed for what Randolph football is. And they're at a whole new level where this is kind of the new expectation. And, a lot of those key playmakers last year are back this year. The number 1 guy for them, you got Dominic Renzoni on the West Boylston side. Randolph's Dominic Renzoni is Makai White, who's been a huge playmaker. He's a guy who can, at any point in the game, break off a 75-yard touchdown run. And Alan Ariska is kind of a do-it-all for them. He can run the ball. He's key in special teams. He's a key defensive player. But I think one of the little bit of an X factor in this game will be quarterback Abe Cornett. Randolph has been such a run-heavy team in the past, but Abe has been the starter there for a couple of years now, and they've gotten more and more comfortable with being a little bit more two-dimensional than they have in the past. And I think if Randolph's going to win this game, I feel like he's going to have a big impact with, whether that be a third down conversion or a big touchdown pass. I think he could kind of be the X factor that could be a little different, where they're able to lean on him a little bit more this year than they have in the past. And they were so run heavy in the past, but I think there's a little bit more of kind of unexpectedness to this year's Randolph team.
Interesting. So Randolph, they have some new wrinkles. Obviously, as you mentioned, a team that's kind of become used to the locker rooms at Gillette Stadium the last few years, but maybe with some added wrinkles. So what's going to win out, Randolph and their added wrinkles, or is it going to be West Boylston trying to march, toward another historic win for 4 straight? I don't know, but that's the fun, is us being at Gillette and trying to figure it out, and writing about it, getting the videos, and talking to the kids and coaches after. So, Chris, I'm going to hold you hostage, and as you mentioned, we're going to talk about Division 7 here a little bit. But Tommy, I want to thank you so much for your perspective on West Boylston. Make sure you follow Tommy's coverage at Gillette Stadium. Tommy, you'll be at Gillette, right? You're not going to pass up on the free media food, right? You'll be there?
No, I'll see you on Saturday. Let's hope we get some good food on early Saturday morning.
Oh, that's right. Well, that's the plan. I mean,
at 10 a.m.
I love the football, but hey, the food, we're not going to complain about that either. So thank you so much, Tommy. Make sure you follow Tommy's coverage at Gillette. Once again, Tommy Cassell from the Worcester Telegram and Gazette. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, guys.
All right, folks. So Chris, well, we're going to keep you around, as I mentioned, as we turn our attention to Division 7. So you mentioned Cohasset. Again, I'll just sort of set the stage here a little bit. They are the number 1 seed. They're 9-2. They're taking on Amesbury, the number 2 seed, 11-0. So shout out to Jim and Clark and the power ratings. Everything sort of worked out there. 1-2, they find their way to the title game. And if we want to, I guess, look at Cohasset and how they got here, beat Leicester in that first round game, beat Rockland pretty good in that second round game, and then beat down by 20 Northbridge in that semifinal game. So they're here now. The last time they were at Gillette, it was 2021 against Wacona. They beat Wacona in that championship game. I think the seniors this year, probably in the 8th grade. Am I good at math? 8th grade probably at that time, maybe freshmen. So maybe have some residual sort of memories of what it means to win at Gillette. But looking at Amesbury quickly, beat South Hadley pretty good in their first round game, 43-8. Beat Uxbridge pretty good, 34-13. And then they beat Clinton by 6 in the semifinal game. And this will be their first appearance since 2023 when they lost to Uxbridge. And they're going for their first title ever. So as it relates to Cohasset, Chris, as I say, I like to think I know it all, but I know you know more. But when I think of Cohasset, I think of Gus Green. I imagine a lot starts there. The mean man, Gus Green, running the ball. I saw a picture of him running the ball the other day. The guy is jacked. Wouldn't want to get in front of that kid. So I'm sure that's a part of their equation and what has led them to success. But overall, as it relates to Cohasset here in Division 7, the number 1 seed, what is it about these guys this year that have gotten them to this title game again for the first time since 21?
Yeah, I mean, you said it right there with Gus Green. He's really taken his game to a whole new level this year. But I think what has been the key for Cohasset is they're a really balanced team that they can really throw the ball. Mike Wildfire has been a multi-year starter at quarterback there. He's thrown for 300-yard games in his career plenty of times, and to have that balance, especially at the Division 7 level, where you're not just all pass or all run, that you could Cohasset's a team that can really win in a couple different ways. And I think that Northbridge semifinal game where they were up big at halftime, and that game was decided pretty early on, was a little bit of an eye opener. Cohasset has played tough teams all year, but throughout this playoff run, Coach Pete Afanasu, who's been around a lot of really good teams, they're no stranger to going Gillette and going on deep playoff runs. He said, this could be one of the best teams he's coached in 20 years, and he's not the type of coach to kind of throw out something like that, willy nilly. That really means something when he's saying it. And Cohasset's a team. One thing that I always look for these small schools that can go on big playoff runs is who did they play in the non-league. In the South Shore League, you're going to play some tough teams, but Cohasset only schedules teams in higher divisions. They've lost to Norwell. They played Plymouth North, Silver Lake, and North Quincy. Those are teams that were, 2 teams that were in the playoffs in Division 2 and another team that, almost made the playoffs in Division 3. So for a Division 7 school to schedule that high up and say, we don't really care what our record is going to look like because we know this is going to help us with the power rankings and it's going to help us when we get to November and December football. And they won most of those games too, which I think says a lot about them. The South Shore League is always a tough league, and they lost a 1-point game to Randolph. They beat up on Mashpee, who was in the Super Bowl last year. So, I think this is a Cohasset team that you might look at it and say it's Gus Green and Mike Wildfire, but they got a lot of guys in the trenches too, which that's what you need to win December football. Is you're going to need to be able to kind of out physical the other team, and that's going to really be put to the test against Amesbury this week.
Right, and it's an interesting point you make too, looking at the non-league schedule for teams, because I feel like, at least for myself, I look at that coming into any sort of particular year, right, where you can sort of talk to coaches about, what do you think you're going to be this year? Who are you leaning on? Where do you kind of think you guys could be if all is going well once you guys get to November? But the real question is looking, as you say, at that non-league, because to me, who a team schedules in their non-league sort of signifies the type of team that they want to be that year. There are other sort of, factors and things like that. But if you're a team, like you mentioned, if you're Cohasset and they're already playing, as you say, a difficult league schedule, and you look into like, holy crap, they're playing a team a higher division, a division or maybe 2 higher. That means, they're obviously shooting for the stars, and I think they got something pretty good, which the number 1 seed in this division, they obviously do. But you mentioned that with Amesbury, taking a look, at them, their ground and pound, when it comes to running the ball and just on the offensive side of the ball, they got Joe Salia, the senior who runs the ball really well, Joe Polio, who runs the ball really well as well. They got a pretty good stable of guys there. Connor Scildone is included in that. Their senior quarterback, Justin Doobie, can throw the ball as well, when his number is called, but they are a team that wants to ground and pound. They want to sort of attack the middle of a team's front 7 and D line and sort of chip away maybe get 4 yards here, 6 yards here, 2 yards here, and then find a seam and break it off. But it will be a tall task against this defensive front for Cohasset, because going back, just again, looking at Cohasset's 3 scores so far, just in this postseason, let alone the work that they did in their league and their non-league, only gave up 6 against Rockland, only gave up 15 against Northbridge, and then 17 against Leicester. So they're keeping teams either in the teens or lower. So it's going to be a tough bargain for Amesbury. But I mean, as I mentioned at the top of this segment too, they have been putting up numbers. I mean, they had the close one with Clinton, where they dropped 20 against the Gales in the semis, but 34, they dropped 34 against Uxbridge, and then, as I mentioned, 43 against South Hadley as well. So really interesting to see, what's going to win out here. Again, I mentioned, the seniors on this Cohasset team, they again, were probably in 8th grade when they beat that Wacona team, and they were probably like, hey, that looks fun. I'm going to want to do that when I'm a senior. And now they have this opportunity. So another really interesting one in Division 7, number 1 Cohasset against number 2 Amesbury. But Chris, you've been too good, so I'm going to keep you again for Division 6 to talk about Norwell. As we look at Division 6, as I say, Norwell 9-2 against Fairhaven 10-1. Again, setting the scene a little bit here. Norwell, first round, took care of Joseph Case. Joseph Case pretty good, 30-0. Beat up Pentucket pretty good, 41-17. And then they decided to take out the reigning champions, Hudson. I think it was 21-7 in the semifinal game. So we will have a new champion in this division, in Division 6, whether it be Norwell or Fairhaven, we'll soon find out. But then looking at Fairhaven, they beat East Bridgewater 44-8 in the first round. Took care of Stoneham, a team that loves to run the ball. In the second round, 34-6. And they dropped almost 50 on Bishop Fenwick in the semifinals. Won that game 49-20. But can I give you the floor a little bit on Norwell? Interested in your perspective on Norwell. If I'm just looking, at their recent history, last time they were in a title game was 1999 Division 4 Super Bowl against Fenwick, if my research is correct. So they're going for their first championship ever. So, this is a program. This will be their first time ever at Gillette. Unlike Fairhaven, who was here last year. So I imagine if we're just looking at the history here, this is without a doubt a historic Norwell team, and the fact they've been able to get here. So what's helping them make this history, I guess, Chris? What are the things that jump out about these guys here in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Norwell's kind of been knocking on this door for a couple of years now. 2 years ago, they were the number 1 seed. They lost to Fairhaven in the quarterfinals, who was the 8th seed, and Fairhaven went on to win the Super Bowl that year. Making their first of now 3 consecutive Super Bowl appearances. But for Norwell, this is a team that I think feels like they probably should have been at Gillette at least 1 or 2 times before this in recent years. So this has been one of those years that's kind of been building for this. And for Norwell, the story kind of starts and ends with Jack Lucarelli, the junior quarterback. He's approaching 3,000 yards on the season. He's got 36 touchdowns. He's over 2,000 yards rushing. And I think kind of the eye-opening game for me was they pushed Scituate to the brink at the beginning of the season, and that really opened up what I thought Norwell was kind of potential, what their potential was this season, what they were capable of. But although he's had an incredible season, he's an incredible player. He's basically like a Mike Allstott at quarterback. He's going to try and run you over. He's not going to run around you. He likes to embrace the contact. But as great as he is, there's a lot of other contributors for him. Colin Gearhart's also rushed for over 800 yards. So you're talking about a team that's rushed for over 3,000 yards basically this season. And there's a couple other guys that should chime in there. But Norwell comes from a tough league. They battled Abington during the regular season. Rockland's a team that's always in the mix in Division 7. They played a tough non-league schedule. And you kept mentioning how this is their first trip to Gillette. And I think for most teams, that would kind of be like how are they going to respond to this moment? But if you look at the athletes at Norwell High, they're pretty much in a state championship every season. Jack Lucarelli was a starter on the basketball team that went undefeated last season and won that crazy overtime game against Old Rochester in the Division 3 final. There's players who are on the lacrosse team that won the state championship. Not too long ago, the soccer team was in the state final and, seems to have an annual trip to at least the Final Four. So there's kind of they maybe haven't played in a football game as big as this, but there's a good chance that they played in a state championship or a big playoff game, kind of equal to this setting. So I think, for other teams, you might be a little worried about how they're going to respond. And yes, Gillette is a little bit of a different stage than playing somewhere else for some of the other sports, but I have faith in them that they're gonna rise to the occasion and play their best. And I think, going back to that semifinal where they knocked off the defending state champs Hudson, they were down 7-0 going into the fourth quarter, and that was a game that could have been. I imagine there were some people thinking, "Oh no, we're gonna get this close and we're gonna lose again." But I think a switch got flipped there in that fourth quarter. They scored 21 unanswered. They came up with big defensive plays, big offensive plays. Matt Pantia, I think, had a couple picks in the fourth quarter and had a big 50-yard passing play. So I think for them to kind of get over that hump a little bit in that game in that fourth quarter, I think kind of adds a different layer of mental toughness that maybe they haven't had on the football field in the last couple of years. First year coach Jason Pythia has done a really good job there, and I think this is a year that's kind of been building for Norwell for a couple of years now, and this was just a crew that was able to get the right bounces to get through.
Interesting. I mean, it's interesting you bring up, although these guys maybe haven't been to Gillette before, but that other big game experience. You mentioned the lacrosse championship. I covered that game. I think it was down on the Cape or down in Buzzards Bay. So, that's interesting. This group of kids, although they may not have that Gillette experience, they know what it takes to win a big game. So interested to see, how they respond, I guess, to the bright lights and the turf with the Flying Elvis on it here in the next few days. But to look at Fairhaven, I guess quickly, I remember Fairhaven last year. They were running the heck out of the ball with Justin Marks, just breaking program records all over the place for that program. I know it was a close game. They go down. I think it was by a touchdown, maybe even less, to Hudson in the title game. But it really seems like for Fairhaven, obviously, Justin Marks ain't walking through that door. I think he's at prep school now. But it hasn't really seemed to matter too much. I mean, they're heading to their third straight title game, just a sort of consistent year after year. Zach Mora is really the consistent or the constant element for this team through these last 3 years. He's a two-way lineman, senior captain, gets it done in the trenches on both sides, leads the way in that triple option offense, opening up running lanes for their chain movers like Aaron Legou, Grant Dormafall, Ian Alexion, and then Evan Lamontagny. So they have Fairhaven. They don't have Justin Marks, but they got a stable of horses that they can just really throw at you. It doesn't seem like they have one guy that's going to run the ball 38 times or anything like that. They can just sort of pepper you with a handful of guys. And that's obviously working pretty well for them because they're scoring around 40 points a game this season. And doing it against teams, like I mentioned, Stoneham. Stoneham is known in this division for running the ball and kind of 3 yards in a cloud of dust. That's sort of their calling card. But Fairhaven, won 34-6 against them in that second round game. So interested to see what's gonna win out here between Norwell and Fairhaven. Norwell, as we talked about, a team, it's their first time here at Gillette, but those kids still have championship experience. And then Fairhaven, a program who came up just short last year and has that sour taste. So it's going to be another fun one in Division 6. So I'm looking forward to see what happens there. But so Chris, for now, we're going to say goodbye to you, but don't go too far because we got to bring you back to talk a little bit about Division 4. So we'll let you get some water, we'll get hydrated, and then we'll see you in 2 divisions. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. Don't be too sad. He'll be back soon, as I mentioned. But I want to change gears here to Division 5. And to do that, I'm going to bring in a guest here in a minute. If we can figure out how that's going to work, we'll get Tyler Hitu in here in a second. But to kind of set the stage here, it's going to be in Division 5, number 1, Shawshene Valley Tech. They are undefeated, and they're going to be taking on number 2, Foxborough. They are 9-2. And to talk about Foxborough, I want to bring in Tyler Hitu from the Sun Chronicle. I'll pull him up here in the stream in a moment. So Tyler, first of all, how are we doing?
I'm good. How you doing? It's been a long build up to this week, and it's a bummer. Football's about to wrap up, but exciting times. I think it's gonna be a great end of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as we mentioned, I mean, this is a rematch here in Division Five of last year's state championship. Once again, the ratings bore out pretty well. Number one, Shawshane is taking on number two, Foxborough. So the 1 and 2, they found their ways to the title game again. So when it comes to Foxborough, just to kind of set the table a little bit for them, as we mentioned, they were in this title game last year against Shawshane, fell 14-0. I remember that being a gritty game. But as it relates to this year, let's just take a look at the last 3 games for Foxborough here. So beat Norton pretty good, 41-13 in that first round game. Shut out Gloucester in the next round. And then they're taking on Archbishop Williams and Hudson Garrity and this great team down in Braintree that is having such a great year. And Foxborough said, that's great, good for you guys, but we're going to shut you out. So they won 31-0 against Archbishop Williams. So back-to-back shutouts in the last 2 rounds here for Foxborough, a program who these last few years has been no stranger to getting to this game. I think between Super Bowls and state championships, this is their 11th total appearance in program history. So, you got Coach Martinelli. The field's named after the guy. He knows how to coach football. So when it comes to this year's team here, Tyler and Foxborough, what's the story here with Foxborough? What if they're gonna make it happen this year and bounce back after last year's loss to Shawsheen? What are those things that are going to hope potentially get them over the hump?
I actually have Jack Martinelli trying to call me right now, which is funny. So the story with them, at least from what I've seen, is if it's not broke, you don't have to fix it. I think that's kind of been a mantra with teams that really like to ground and pound and utilize their size on the offensive line and defensive line. So we're going to see a lot of running. Jack Taft has sort of taken the reins of that rushing attack and kind of run away with it. Literally, he had 3 touchdowns, 2 running, 1 receiving against Archbishop Williams, and I don't want to say it's gonna rely on him, but a big part of their success is gonna come from if they can get him going. If they can get him 4 to 6 yards a carry, can he fall forward and get positive yards? They're gonna be in business. Also, they have Kandileski under center at quarterback, who, I think it's unconventional. You see a two-way player in football play quarterback and play in the secondary, and Dulesky does it, and he does it at a very high level. He had an interception against Archbishop Williams, and I think now they might have. I think they're well into double digits in terms of interceptions this year. He can utilize his legs. He's very slippery, very shifty. He will run from one sideline to the other and then run double back 20 yards, and then somehow he turns it into a net gain, which is very impressive and something that they didn't have the last couple of years. With respect to their quarterback, Mike Marcasella, loved watching him play, was a very good passer, but they just didn't have that. And I think Dulesky's just skill set under center that can add another ripple to their offense. But I think it's going to start at the run game. If they can get it going early, if they can strike first, get a defensive stop, then put up points maybe on the next possession, get it to like a 10, 14-point game, I think they'll be in business, because them and a lot of other Hockomock schools, they love to run the ball. And when they run the ball, they will run it for 10 minutes or take up an entire quarter, and they will slowly bleed you out. And that has to be what they do this week.
Right. I imagine for the reporters out there, including yourself, that probably cover a decent amount of Hockomock games, you're getting in and out pretty early. I mean, teams are running the ball, that clock's moving. And as you mentioned, so Foxborough, being one of those teams, as you mentioned, in the Hockomock, run the heck out of the ball with the likes of, King Philip, who we'll talk about later, and North Attleboro, who we'll talk about later as well. But I guess if we want to look at the other side here, we're talking about Foxborough, the number 2 seed here in D5. We got to look at the number 1 seed, Shawsheen Valley Tech. 11-0. Sid Tildesley last year had a great year for Shawsheen, but he's off at Harvard hitting the books, and he's wrestling over at Harvard now. So Sid Tildesley's not walking through that door, but it hasn't seemed to matter too much for Shawsheen Valley Tech, because, as we say, they are undefeated in the top seed. They got Jake Banda, who had over 30 carries in the semifinal round against North Reading a couple of weeks ago. Over 260 yards carrying the ball. So they're going to be feeding him pretty good. He's going to be pretty full, I think, by the time that game is over. And just, I guess, take a look at their last few and how Shawshene Valley Tech got back to this moment. 55-14 over Salem. That's pretty good. 28-7 over St. Mary's of Lynn. And I mentioned that game for Banda where he had 30 carries for 260 plus yards. That was a 22-14 win over North Reading in overtime. And Banda scored a touchdown in overtime to put the team ahead. And he figured he wasn't making enough of an impact on the game, so he figured he would intercept a pass, a North Reading pass on the next drive as well, just to kind of put the cherry on top. So when it comes to Shawshene Valley Tech, it feels like, so it's a rematch, as we say, of last year's game. It seems like there are, some similarities here as it relates to what kind of both teams want to do. It seems like Shawshene has their guy in Banda and Foxborough, has their guys when it comes to running the ball. So that is going to be a classic, just sort of physical game to look forward to in that division, and one that I'm, again, looking forward to as well. Just looking at these games, we've really we got it pretty made here with some really good state championship games, as we always do. But so Tyler, I appreciate your perspective here on Foxborough. But just as I've done to Chris, don't go too far, because I mentioned we will be talking about King Philip and North Attleboro in Division 3, and we'll be joined by Alex Agrello from Recruiting Board for that. So we'll get the triple box going, and we're going to go nuts on those later. So as I said to Chris, get some water. We'll be hitting you back here in probably about 10 minutes. How's that sound?
Cool. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, Tyler. Once again, don't get scared. He'll be back. And don't worry, we got Chris, who we're going to pull back in here again in a second as well to talk about, as we promised, Division 4. So, Chris, you guys got your work cut out for you here at Gillette. You got plenty of teams you guys are going to be covering at Gillette. So, if we want to talk about when it comes to your side of things here in Division 4, we got number 1 Scituate against number 2 Tewksbury. Scituate 10-1, Tewksbury 11-0. So, looking at Scituate, just I guess the road that they took to get here, they dropped 30 plus in every round of the tournament so far. 33-10 win over Tantascwa, 34-28 win over Walpole, and a 34-21 win over, of course, rival Duxbury. That win over Walpole, just looking at 34-28, that's a program that was in Division 3 last year. And made it to the Division 3 state semifinals last year and moved to Division 4. So again, that's impressive. That second round win, of course, the wins over Tantascwa and Duxbury are as well. But that Timberwolves program was on the cusp of getting to a D3 title last year, now in D4, and Scituate took care of business there. Obviously, they are, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scituate are the reigning champs. They took care of business against Duxbury last year in what has kind of had been the last few years the Scituate Duxbury Invitational. I'm pretty sure those two teams always found their way to the championship game, but they took care of the rival in the semifinals to get to this point. And then looking at Tewksbury, they're just dropping points and not allowing their opponents to drop any points, really. They played Middleborough in the first round, won 49-7. Ashland in the second, won 34-7, and then beat Canton 35-6 in the semis. So I'll talk about Tewksbury here in a little bit, but I wanted to, I guess, give it over to you with Scituate. So, what can we really say about the Sailors? They're used to this. They're built for this. This is sort of kind of what they do as they get to this point. But when it comes to, I guess, this version, if we're talking 2025 Scituate, what's, I guess, your read on this year's team in particular? If they're going to defend their championship, their belt, so to speak, how are they going to do it? What are the ways in which they succeed and win games this year?
Yeah, but before I get to kind of talking about Scituate, I guess just when I'm looking at this game, I'm seeing this from a kind of a South Shore perspective, but from a statewide perspective, I get the feeling that Tewksbury is a favorite in this one, and maybe a little bit more than a slight favorite, just because of how dominant they've been all season long. Do you get that vibe too? Because I can't remember a time where the top seeded defending state champs maybe came into a game, with Scituate's reputation kind of being able to play the chip on the shoulder card.
No, you're right. You look at those 3 postseason games. Canton this year, has had one of their better teams they've had in recent memory. And they go and hold Canton to 6, and they put 35 points on them. And, they haven't given up more than a touchdown a game here in this entire postseason. And this program, too, was that when it comes to Tewksbury, last time they were in a title game, this would be their 9th appearance, whether between Super Bowl and state championship in program history. Last time they got to this point, this isn't a team that, Tewksbury has history. They have program history, that's for certain. But this isn't a team that's here, every year. Last time they were at Gillette was 2018 when they played Springfield Central in the Division III state championship, when Springfield Central was in Division III. And that was a 20-7 loss to the Golden Eagles. So, it is interesting. It is an interesting point, not being the higher seed, but having this sort of undefeated sort of record. I'm sure if you're the Tewksbury coaching staff, you probably haven't had to get the guys sort of juiced up too much during the season. But I wonder if you're, the coaches, you sort of say like, oh, we're number 2, these guys from the South Shore, number 1. But obviously Scituate, you look at their league and, that always helps things. So, but I guess I would have to tend to agree with you to answer the question. But before talking, I guess, more specifically about Tewksbury and the why they're undefeated, when it comes to Scituate, I guess individually, who are the big returners from last year coming into this year who have that sort of championship experience? Who are some of those guys who were able to bring that, that intel here into 2025 that are impact players?
Yeah, I mean, for Scituate, kind of the story starts with Grayson Foley, the junior running back. He was a piece of last year's team, but he was kind of more of a role player. He would be used in spots, but he's kind of been, he's been the catalyst for the entire team this year. From talking about some of the names we talked about from Randolph, Cohasset, and Norwell, I'm getting a headache just thinking about who's going to be our player of the year, because this is as deep as a list that I can remember of really deserving candidates, and Grayson Foley is certainly on that list. He came into the year, he was kind of one of those players that you kind of expected to have a breakout season, but I still don't know if I had this in mind. And, if we go back, rewind about a month ago, he was on crutches for the last game of the season against Hanover, and his status for the playoffs was looking like, it could be up in the air a little bit. And then he's back, and in the quarterfinals, he has 400 all-purpose yards in a game. He rushes for a touchdown, gets a return touchdown, catches a touchdown. So he's just one of the most electric players in our coverage area. So, for Scituate, it's just get him the ball somewhere in space, and something good's going to happen. But, with how dominant Grayson Foley's been, Johnny Donovan, the quarterback, has kind of been under the radar a little bit. He's the all-time program leader in touchdown passes, and he's kind of, he's not the lead in the film this year. But, I think that's something that might change at the Super Bowl. I imagine that Tewksbury's first option is going to be, we got to slow down Grayson Foley and try and keep him limited, which might put a little bit more pressure on Johnny Donovan, who's been incredibly efficient all season long. And I think for Scituate to come out on top of this one, it's not just going to be Grayson Foley having a 300-yard game. I think it might be Johnny Donovan having to have a 300-yard game, or maybe it's going to be kind of a grinded out 14-7 type game where maybe you need a fumble or something like that. But I do think that this is a little bit of a unique situation for Scituate where they can play a little bit of the underdog card, because I can't remember the last time that I've walked into a game and thought Scituate might not win this one. It's been quite a while for them.
Right, and it is interesting you mentioned as well. Johnny Donovan. That's just a name when you think of high level quarterbacks in Massachusetts. Johnny Donovan is one of those names, and it's interesting to think. I'm sure as a kid you want to throw 6 touchdowns a game, but you're going to do what you need to do within the offense to be successful. And Foley's running the ball as well as he is, and let's continue to lean into that. So it is interesting to think that just sort of the depth of Scituate in their ability to do a lot of different things offensively, that if Donovan has to take a step back and not throw it 30 times a game or something, they can do that and be successful. So that's a really interesting element to the game. I will be interested to see if they get in a spot where it's 2 minutes to go, fourth quarter, it's 3rd and 11, balls at midfield. It's a good guy to have back there if necessary. But as it relates to just looking a little bit more at Tewksbury, as you mentioned, number 2 seed, although they are undefeated, they like to run the ball. Ben Christopher ran the ball particularly well against Canton in the state semifinals, so the team in total offense. And Johnny Sullivan on defense, he had not one, not two, but 3 interceptions on defense. So if the ball is in the air, if you're Johnny Donovan, you gotta keep your eyes open. You gotta, just Sullivan's gonna be looking for an interception because he flashed that talent in that semifinal game. And I mentioned as well, with Tewksbury, once again, just 49-7, 34-7, 35-6. Although Scituate will be obviously the best team they play all year. And also it's a team, as we mentioned, last time Tewksbury was at Gillette was in 2018. So, 7 years ago, it's a whole new crew. These Scituate kids, they win the title last year, and they have that continuity of Foley, Donovan, and others. So it's interesting. Some of these games, I'm thinking about outcomes, and I guess I have the 2 columns in my head, and I can, for some teams more than others, I can think of more reasons as to why a team will win the game than maybe the other in all of these divisions. But I feel like this is kind of the most difficult one to sort of figure out. It feels like it really could go either way. So I'm really looking forward to it. And yes, Chris, you're probably thinking, can I go now? Yes, you've been more than charitable with your time. So thank you so much to Chris for sticking around and giving his perspective on teams in his region. He's going to be very busy, but probably busy between getting winter preview content too. Oh my goodness, this guy's going to be working his tail off. So try to have fun while you're doing it. We'll see you at Gillette, Chris. I'll see you in the buffet line with the free lunch and dinner. So I'll see you then. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that was Chris McDaniel, everybody from the Patriot Ledger. Let's look forward here. It's getting pretty hot and heavy here. We're going to move up to Division 3, King Philip against North Attleboro. And to do that, we're going to do the vaunted triple box. We're going to bring in Alex Sagrella from Recruiting Board, and we're going to bring Tyler back from the Sun Chronicle. So let's see. We'll get Tyler back in here. I know how to use technology. There we go. So gentlemen, welcome back, or I guess welcome to when it comes to Alex. This guy's locked and loaded. He's got his headset on. He's not goofing around. So I want to start here. So interestingly enough, these 2 teams, King Philip and North Attleboro, teams I've now seen multiple times. Alex and you and I saw King Philip against Natick early in the regular season. I think you've seen them multiple times at this point, though. Saw North Attleboro against Mansfield and lose to Mansfield early in the year, and then just saw them run all over Milton in the state semifinals. So I guess I kind of want to start here. Alex, when it comes to this game, King Philip, they're in Division 2 these last few years. They're now in Division 3, which has just made Division 3. Division 3 was just a gauntlet this year. Godspeed to anybody that made the playoffs in D3. It was just, oh my goodness, just wild every week. The great teams that are in it. Malden Catholic goes on the run, makes it to the semis. King Philip takes care of them. But when it comes to this game, it's number 1 against number 7. North Attleboro, the reigning champs. King Philip, the new kids on the block in this division. Alex, what I guess interests you the most when it comes to this game? Oh, I can't hear Alex, unfortunately. I don't know what the problem is. I'm sure he's saying something good though. But here, Alex, here's what I'll do. I'll throw you down, and then once your mic is figured out, I'll pull you back up. That's what we'll do. All right, we'll do that. All right. Stick around for Alex. He'll be back. That's right. We got Tyler. So Tyler, when it comes to these 2 teams, KP, North Attleboro, we got ourselves a Hockomock state championship here. So I guess I'll pose the question to you. I mean, North Attleboro, they are the reigning champs. Although they are the number 7 seed, they have found their way back to this moment. Frankie Strachan has played a big hand in that. Big, literally and figuratively, the kid's huge. And then King Philip, I mentioned being the new kids on the block in Division 3, but they've made themselves at home, becoming the number 1 seed. So this game here in Division 3, what interests you? What has your interest piqued as it relates to this game?
I mean, it's fun because they've played each other before already. It was a 21-7 final for King Philip earlier in the season, and it could have been a lot closer. Frankly, it should have been 14-7. There's a controversial call that went King Philip's way for a touchdown, but um, it's exciting because it's debatably the best league in the state for high school football, and it's just two teams that just have such similar, not exactly the same, but two such similar play styles in terms of just loving to run the ball, and they do it so well. North will run right down your throat. Frankie Strachan will. You have to have three guys on him to take him down, and when you take him down, it's for 5 to 6 yards. And Mike Strachan will go to him 14 times in a row. He will mix in one single pass on a drive, if that, and they'll go the whole way, take 9 minutes doing it, and they're going to score every time. King Phillips sort of a similar fashion where they have multiple guys that can do it. Keegan Canto Osorio is a guy, Talon King, Ryan Greenwood, who's technically their fullback, but he still gets touches. They have multiple bodies that can do it, and all are more than capable. But it's going to take a group effort for them in terms of running the ball, and up front, both teams very strong, very physical. Whoever's going to win the game has to win at the line, and everything else is secondary. I mean, you need to win at that line. If you can create the holes for your guys, then you're gonna win that game, and it's going to be a quick one. Might not be as high scoring as some other divisions, but it's you're gonna be running the ball all day, and cumulative rushing yards could be north of 700. I would say it's gonna be that type of game.
Yeah, between Talon King, Keegan Canto Osorio, Strachan, both the lines are going to be working. And in a minute here, I do want to bring Alex back in, so we can get his perspective on this game as well. He's sorted through his technical difficulties. He's a professional. So Alex,
Sorry
thank you
about
for no, you're good. Thank you for joining back. So when it comes to this game, Tyler and I were just talking about it. We mentioned, we've seen these teams. You and I were both at that the Natick King Philip game, which King Philip found a way to. I think it was like a 3-point game, maybe a 2-point game, something like that on the road. King Philip was able to win against the Division I opponent, who was pretty good and made it to the quarterfinals in the Division I state playoffs. And I saw North Attleboro, as you mentioned at the top, watched them beat Milton pretty good in the semifinals, and watched them lose to Mansfield earlier in the year. But so when it comes to this game here in D3, KP, the new guys in D3, North Attleboro, they're the reigning champs. What interests you here in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the guy that also makes the joke. We'll be out of there in 48 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also really excited we get to see a good old-fashioned, rock fight in the Hockomock, between two really tough physical teams who are very well disciplined and coached. First off, I want to say it's very rare. We talked kind of about why I was listening earlier to just about rare situations, and it's very rare that a team moves into a division and all of a sudden they're the big guy on the block. And that's what KP's built. When everybody found out they're in D3, and they probably every team was like, "Oh God, KP's in D3. That is they're a mammoth of a program." And I think there was one team specifically that had issue with that, and that's North Attleboro. They're like, hey, hold on. We're the team that just won D3. Like, they're coming into our territory. So I think that this is a kind of a game that if you're North Attleboro specifically, you've been like, all right, well, we're ready for them when they come our way. And they play each other each year. KP got the best of them this year. But I personally think that KP, when I watched them with you, I was so impressed with their linebackers. Danson, he is a guy for them. He's also a fullback that caught a touchdown for them. Danson and then McDonald as well, number 5 for them. Two of the most pure tacklers I watched this year against Natick. I mean, a tough physical team who we got to see kind of KP's full defense, by the way, that game, you and I. We got to see how tough they are in the run defense and then how they can work in the pass defense, and they got after them. We got King also on the defensive line, number 66, who is a guy for them. So, it is no question how tough that this team is, how physical their defense is as well. And everybody knows that KP, they can run the ball as good as anybody. Keegan Cano-Estrario, he's a hell of a player. He's as good as anybody. And then you can rotate Tylen King as well. But they also threw for 3 touchdowns when we watched the play too, Gage.
Yeah.
Their quarterback's got an arm himself. So I think that both teams' quarterbacks deserve some recognition, because I was going to say Brousseau as well. He impressed me. We talked about that. I mean, was he not an X factor in that game against Milton, Gage?
Yeah, absolutely. It was so interesting to see. I mean, I imagine if you're a defense preparing for North Attleboro, it's already difficult enough to try your best to contain Strachan and everything that he's going to do. But once I saw there was a design play where they're going towards the sidelines and Strachan is the lead blocker for Brousseau, I'm like, oh my god, because I mean Brousseau is, I mean he's quick too, and if he needs to throw, he can. But I'm like, oh my god, I mean you're already. Like this, it's almost not fair. I mean, you get this kid out wide in space, and he could block 2 guys with at the same time. So that's another thing I'm interested in. And you mentioned even the play action pass game for King Philip. Gebhard can throw the ball, no problem if he needs to. You mentioned Canto Osorio. I think he connected with him on a wheel route. I remember that on the far sideline at Natick, in front of the Natick student section. So he's got a good arm, and it's true as well. That Natick team, I mean, Natick this year was one of the best teams in the state. They were a top 10 team the entire year. So, and with what Natick does, I mean, they run the ball a lot into kind of the same vein of, a North Attleboro. So it's interesting to think, or sort of to say, like, okay, can they stop the run? Are they able to do that against a run-first team? Well, it's like, yeah, because we've seen it. And then, of course, that Hawk schedule, as we sort of talked about earlier, all those teams in the Hawk know how to run the ball and do it well. So King Philip has, it's not like they haven't played a team that knows how to run the ball. A lot of the teams that they've played not only know how to run the ball, they do it at an incredibly high level. Can they do it against North Attleboro and Frankie Strachan? We'll soon find out.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, Gage, real quick. They fade a lot of people who can run the ball, but there's not a lot of players, and Tyler, you can attest, that are like Frankie Strachan.
Yeah,
not a lot.
He's a specimen, and they've had some kids the last couple of years. I remember they had a 2 tandem back system maybe 2 years ago that one was a bruiser and one was a speed guy, and they utilized it very well. And then last year they had a system where they were running a lot of quarterback draws, quarterback design runs with Chase Rizzoli, and now they just have a guy that can just run you over. And I don't blame Mike Strachan for going to Frankie 30, 40 times a game, to the point where it's almost predictable, but you still can't stop it. And it's I think it's a testament to their offensive line. I don't know what they're feeding those kids in North Attleboro year after year, but they just have dudes that can shove people out of the way and create an opening for their backs.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to see what wins out, and it just, I guess, give this game a little bit more context. Just looking at the road that both teams took to get here. King Philip, we mentioned that top seed. They beat Chicopee Comp, previously undefeated Chicopee Comp, 51-0 in the first round. They beat Mansfield, obviously a program they're familiar with, and lost. Oh, well, never mind, North Attleboro did. Obviously, King Philip is familiar with Mansfield, beat them 42-12 in the second round. And then they play Malden Catholic, who was new to the division, in the semifinals. Another newcomer. Malden Catholic goes up from Division 4 to Division 3 this year. And Malden Catholic lost in the first round of the Division 4 tournament last year and then goes up to 3. So, I mean, kind of preseason, you're thinking like, okay, set that bar high and chase it. And they have a great postseason run and get to that semis. And King Philip takes care of them 21-13. So that's how King Philip was able to get to their now 7th all-time appearance in a championship game. And then North Attleboro, They beat Milford 21-14, low scoring, gritty game. They take down Barnstable or take care of Barnstable 42-21 in the second round. And then that semifinal game, 43-29 over Milton. Milton, they kind of were starting to figure things out late in that fourth quarter, but it was a little bit too late for them. So they take care of the Wildcats to earn their 12th total appearance back in the state championship game. We mentioned they're the reigning champions. North Attleboro are. They beat Mansfield in last year's game 35-0. So, as we say, we just talked about it. What's going to win out? Is it going to be Frankie Strachan and Dylan Brousseau and that awesome offensive line at North Attleboro? Or is King Philip, are they going to kick the door down in this new division for them in Division 3 and win a title in this division? I'm looking forward to see what happens. I think that game is Saturday. Could be Friday. I get paid
Friday night.
Friday night.
Friday night. Last one on the schedule.
Last one on the schedule. There we go. So it'll be under the lights. Lights will be bright. Someone's going to win. I'm looking forward to see who it's going to be. Gentlemen, we're going to keep you around here as well because we're loving the insight to talk about Division 2 a little bit with Catholic Memorial and Bishop Fian. And to do that, we're going to do the vaunted quad box here in a minute to get Nate Weitzer in from the Boston Globe if he's around. But just, I guess, to start the convo a little bit to sort of set the stage in Division 2. Catholic Memorial, who would have thunk it? Catholic Memorial in the state championship. They're the top seed, 9-2, and they're taking on Bishop Fian, the number 2 seed, 10-1. So think about Catholic Memorial. You got Kais Flannery, Ramar Thomas, Mac Fitzgerald, Marcelino Antunes, Christian Simmons, Caleb Garrity. The list goes on. They have found their way back to the title game in D2. And we look at Fian. This is their 11th total appearance in a title game. The last time they were in a title game was 2012. They beat Linfield in the Division 3A Super Bowl 21-7. So Fian is back. They had a first round bye, just like Catholic Memorial did. And before we get into it, I want to, as I said, pull in the globes. Nate Weitzer here. This is going to look like First Take over here with so many talking heads, but this is the brain trust here of Massachusetts high school football. We're getting nuts. So Nate, I want to, I guess we could start with you. When it comes to this game, look at Catholic Memorial. They have the first round bye, just like Fian did. They have not given up a point this postseason. They beat Wellesley 47-0. They beat Winchester 49-0. So they've been taking care of business as they're known to do. And we look at Fian. They beat Chelmsford, and they eked out a win over Bridgewater Raynham in the semis. So what can we really say, I guess, here to start, with this, Nate, here in Division 2? CM Division 2 has sort of been, their division off and on here for the last, 5-6 years, somewhat. They had that year where I think they go down in the semis to Marshfield. And back when King Philip was in Division 2, they were able to take care of business against Marshfield and win the title. But other than that, it's been all CM. So I guess, do we see that changing? What is the perspective here, for your perspective on this game, Nate, here in D2?
Well, I think it's what – can you hear me first of all?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, just checking. I think it's what Brian Pitterball said right after the game, right after Fian came back and beat BR, is like, we're playing with house money, right? I mean, it's just like nobody would expect them to win. Nobody would expect them to really even be in the game because he told me also that BR was the best passing attack they faced this year, and that ain't nothing compared to what CM is going to be throwing out there, man. I mean, they have the best athletes every time they step off the bus. They probably go 7-8 deep at wide receiver, that guys we don't even see get out there. And Kais Flannery is very in control of that offense. Got a lot of snaps under his belt. So it's just going to be really tough to stop. And then you look at that offensive line, just absolutely massive. Like even guys like Kane Mankins might have trouble generating pressure. CM's just an all-star team, man. I mean, those guys, Mac Fitzgerald, Liam Conlon, they jump off the screen proverbially on defense. Those guys are incredible. And then Dibbs can push all the right buttons. So yeah, it's just an absolute bear to try to game plan for them, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a tough one, I imagine. If you're Fian to kind of get your arms around, as you mentioned, the depth at not just receiver, but just so many other places. It's like you get deep into the game, and there's just more guys they can just kind of throw at you. But Alex, I wanted to, I guess, get it over to you. I guess whether it be just CM or Fian. I know. I mean, we've seen CM a couple times, this year. I don't know if you've been able to see Fian or not, but I guess just talking more specifically about this CM team in comparison to last year's Catholic Memorial team, what to you, Alex, I guess jumps out about this 2025 team, maybe in comparison to last year's team, do you think?
Yeah, well, last year's team, I felt like it was funny watching them. I felt like they were still young. With Antunes only being a junior, with Flannery only being a junior, Caleb Garrity only being a junior, the Simmons is only being a junior. So I felt like last year I was like, okay, it's going to be interesting how they are this year. And for being honest, they're not as good as they were last year either. Last year they blanked St. John's Prep. This year, Prep gave it to them pretty bad. If we're going to be honest, so I see them. They're still in this position for a reason. They're still one of the best programs in all of New England. I think that this year, one thing that to beat a team like Fian, because Fian is also, I mean, hey, they might be playing with house money, they might be underdogs, but they are a good, well coached team and they have some good players. And I'll say this: if the team's going to beat CM, the two teams that have beaten them this year, Zavarian and St. John's Prep, came down to the quarterbacks that can move the ball, and they got a good quarterback themselves, Owen Mortis, who's going off the Bates. They got their size on the line too with Kane Makins. Kane Makins, is going off to Ole Miss. Who knows? I don't know what that status is like right now, but Kane, you have yourself a good game against somebody like Mark Antunes. Who knows what happens? And so it's funny. It's like, yeah, they're the underdogs, but at the same time, Fian's earned the right to be there, and they're earned the right to get some respect. But it's a little bit different, though, for CM also from this year, where Simmons is their running back this year. But last year, they had Dodd and Sharp, who were like the guys. Going into the season, they were going to have that guy. Well, it's kind of been a little bit of everything this year for CM. Like, maybe sometimes they try to get Ramar Thomas the ball. Maybe in the games we've seen, Gage, it's been Kais running the ball mainly and trying to get the ball down the field. So I do think that this is still a good team for CM. It's a state championship caliber team. They've had to really, I think they're, like I said, I'm just offensively, this is the first time I've seen it where I wouldn't say they really have an identity offensively. They kind of just do a lot of different things. And that's actually Fian's game a little bit too, believe it or not. They can do a lot of different things over there offensively. So it's going to be an interesting one. They're not actually too far away from each other geographically either. I think probably like 45 minutes away, so a little bit of extra story there, maybe some crossover between the two. But yeah, I'm excited though. But it's to answer your question originally. It's a good CM team. Maybe not what it's been in years past, but that's not to knock this team. It's years past. They've had some crazy talent.
Right. And it's interesting to think too, because I agree, Alex. I mean, this year's CM team is still very, very good, but it might not be quite maybe what last year's team was. I mean, you mentioned you blank St. John's Prep last year, and you really that's something. Obviously, this year they fall to St. John's Prep. They lose to Zavarian in that game with the field goal at the end with, Drake May is there, and it's a whole situation in Westwood. The whole place was rocking. So I do wonder if they're just on a mission now where they're not able to get the Catholic Conference crown, but they just say, like, let's just really take care of business here in D2. But if they're going to do that, I want to bring you in, Tyler, here. They have to beat, a Fian team that has been really good this year. That's the reason why they're here. So we've talked about Makins on that line. We've talked about some other guys. But when it comes to, I guess, Fian, and your perspective on them with whether it be seeing them or just your view on them and what they've been able to do this year to lock down, that number 2 seed. why are they in this game? How do they get to this game? And if they're going to be successful, what are the reasons going to be here?
Yeah, I remember talking at actually the preseason football media day. Fiend wanted to load up their schedule with teams that would be playoff caliber, and that's why they got Severian week 1. Usually it would have been North Attleboro, but they wanted Severian. Yes, they lost 35-7. I think that was sort of a period where they wanted to figure themselves out and just explore what they had. They were kind of rebuilding a little bit on defense, and they didn't really know who maybe their guys were. And they clearly found it. I mean, they came right out. They've smacked teams in the mouth, and they've gone on an absolutely brilliant run the last couple of weeks. But I think their whole idea was to get ready, face the playoff caliber teams early, and see what that level was going to be. And I think they've lived up to exactly what they wanted to do. Now they get Catholic Memorial, who last time I saw them beat the brakes off of King Philip, which is a statement I don't think I've ever heard. I don't think I'm going to say again for a while. It's a good team, but from what I've heard from area coaches and just other media personnel in the area, it's a beatable CM team. And Bishop Fiend they'll need to play their absolute best to beat Catholic Memorial. And have they been playing very good? Sure. I don't think they've hit the level of their best yet. At least in the playoffs, they haven't. Mankins is going to have his hand full. Owen Mortis is going to have his hands full. He's going to have not a lot of time to process who's open. It's going to be a lot of probably quick passes and maybe running for his life a little bit. It's going to be a tough task for them. But also the phrase "a man with nothing to lose" is a scary person to know. I think that's Brian Pinnabell. Because like you said, they're playing with house money. They literally have nothing to lose. Nobody expected them to be here in D2. Nobody expects them to win. And I'd be lying if I said I was in that camp. I have a lot of faith in Bishop Fiend. Brian's a good friend of mine. I know a lot of people that went to Fiend. I root for them if I can. But it's going to be a tough game for them. And I think if they can keep it, if they can score early, put a little pressure on CM to try and answer back and maybe get a stop or two in the first half, and keep it within a possession, I think they'll be in good shape on Friday or on Saturday rather.
Right. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, you're right. It's the second to last game, on Saturday. And you mentioned getting that Zavarian game early on the schedule, and them wanting to challenge themselves and really sort of experience that level. And I mean, it served them because they're here now and they're in the championship game against that level of talent and program, which is Catholic Memorial. So it's going to be interesting to think, for Fian, as I mentioned, their first appearance in a title game since 2012 when they were in the 3A Super Bowl, and they beat Linfield. That was 13 years ago. So they're back at Gillette for the first time in over a decade, and we've talked about it ad nauseum. They have a tall mountain to climb, but they're here, and as you say, playing with house money. So that's going to be a really interesting one on Saturday night. And as sort of an appetizer, getting into the final game, I think it is the final game of the slate in Division One. But Tyler, I just want to say I appreciate your perspective and sticking around. Sharing your perspective on the teams and in your coverage area. So make sure you follow Tyler and the Sun Chronicles coverage at Gillette here on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Thank you so much, Tyler, for jumping in, and see you this weekend.
Hey, thanks, guys. Have fun this week.
All right. See you around, Tyler. But all right, gentlemen, we're here. Let's stretch out. It's Division One. We're here. We made it. We're over an hour in. We started with the real football, as I said at the top, in Division 8, and now we're here, Division 1. So where do we begin, really,
Gage,
gentlemen?
Real quick, this was the same lineup from last year.
Oh, wow.
Us three, yeah. It was the same lineup for last year. Same time next year?
Wow. So, hey, we'll see next year. I mean, who knows? Wow, it's becoming, it's becoming usual. It's becoming annual. So, although it's same lineup, the teams are half different. So we got St. John's Prep and Zavarian, number 1 against number 3. Prep being the number 1, taking on Zavarian. So I mean, there's a million different places. I feel like we can kind of start with this. Obviously, they play Thanksgiving last week. Christian McIntyre does some McIntyre stuff. He has a great game receiving. I think 100+ yards. Receiving the ball. Obviously, if you're Prep, Chris Vargas has not been involved since the first half of the Framingham game, which was the first round game. He's been down with an injury. But especially in that Central Catholic State semifinal game, it's been kind of Johnny football time a little bit with John Boudreau stepping in, the senior doing his thing. I only say that because they were doing a Johnny football chant during the game, which I thought was very funny. He unleashed the cannon a little bit. Because you might be thinking, okay, we got the backup coming in. Of course, he's a senior. He's been around. He's got Coach Brian St. Pierre coaching him in his ear. He obviously, has he's definitely well prepared. But he threw a bomb. I think it was down the left sideline for a long touchdown. May have been to Selve. I can't remember. And that sort of made me say, like, oh, all right, well, they got a guy that can definitely throw the ball. That's for sure. They're not just throwing toward the sideline and doing screens with this guy. So Boudreau has been in there. And it's interesting to think coming into this year, a lot of Prep's guys, the big impact guys, I feel like aren't seniors. It really has been younger guys. If I think of seniors for Prep, I mean, Alex Tarissy's really kind of come through. I think he had an interception against CM, which I remembered sealed the game for them a couple weeks back. But really, it's been younger guys. It's been Selve, who's a sophomore, I think. Yeah. And then obviously Vargas during the year when he was healthy, among other guys as well. Kind of bearing the lead on Max Parent and Jordan Toribio, who would look like the number 1-2 running back duo in the state right now. I'm sure Talon King and Keegan Conto-Azario at King Philip will have some things to say about that, but they just look so good. But I mean, I could go on and on about this game, and so I'm going to pass the rock to one of you guys. Nate, when it comes to this game, we mentioned they just played each other last week, and Xaverian found a way to win. But bright lights, nightcap, Division I state championship, Saturday night. I'll give you the floor. What's going to happen here, do you think?
Well, I mean, control the line of scrimmage, you win the game. If we're just zooming out immediately, right? I mean, these teams, as much as they have great skill players and they have two of the best receivers in the state, they are ground and pound teams, like at their core, right? And you said that Prep is young at the skill positions. I believe they have a bunch of seniors stepping in on both sides of the line and the linebacker core, guys who've been waiting their turn, right? St. Pierre loves to talk about their depth and just the way their program feeds people up into this position. And that's what you're seeing with the quarterback as well, right? Is like guys who are ready, who have been on scout team, and so, I mean, I think Prep might have a bit of an edge there that we didn't necessarily see or that we did kind of see down the stretch of that Thanksgiving game, right? I mean, when Xaverian couldn't run the 4-minute offense to run out the clock, Prep is running all over them. They actually came right out in the third quarter, had like a 60-yard drive. They just fumbled. So, I mean, we'll see if there's some of the carryover from that. I mean, I think you definitely want to be watching the run game and seeing who's moving who back as far as how this game's going to go. It should definitely be a good one, though. I mean, it's crazy to think that these teams, I think I've been in 13 of the last 14 D1 Super Bowls, have featured at least one of these teams. And it's just, here we are again, 2 years later, them playing again.
Yeah, it's like, what's the only one I guess I'm thinking recent memory? What, Central Catholic?
2021, yeah.
Yeah,
it was Central Catholic and Springfield.
Wow, yeah, that's wild. I mean, you mentioned the running game too, of like sort of who's going to sort of dominate that or win that battle. We mentioned Toribio and Parent. You look at Xaverian. I mean, they've been banged up. I mean, they had Kyle Celeste, who was running the ball, I thought, pretty well for them earlier in the year. I know he's been down with an injury, but Bryce Todd has continued to be in the mix for Xaverian. Rocco Sestito, I think had a really good game against Catholic Memorial. He sort of had a breakout game, I thought, against Catholic Memorial earlier in the regular season. So I think he's only a sophomore. I remember Coach Alfanaro said something after the game about how Rocco he's too young to sort of get sort of overwhelmed by the moment because he doesn't know what he doesn't know. It's like he's almost too young to sort of think like, hey man, you're playing like Catholic Memorial in a really big game right now, and he's just sort of like, okay, whatever, I'm just going to run the ball and run over guys. So interested to see how much he's going to be able to contribute against, this prep front seven at Gillette. But Alex, I want to throw it to you again. These are two teams, you're familiar with, really the three of us are very familiar with. If you follow high school football in Massachusetts, you're familiar with Xaverian and prep. But what jumps out to you? What are you looking at? I guess just matchups. Is there something, bigger picture? What's X factors? What jumps out to you about this game at Gillette?
Well, what's been jumping out to me is I'm getting all these questions about, is Vargas playing? Like, is this a smoke screen? Is this real? What is this? Because, you said he hasn't played since the first half of the Framingham game. And, part of me, I get it. The kid is a competitor. I never got confirmation on what exactly happened. But if it's serious enough for him to miss this amount of games, is he really going to come back at the state championship? Who knows, right? Like, Nate, were you at the thing? You were at the Thanksgiving game, right? Did he dress?
No, he's been on crutches. Yeah, the last few games.
I personally, I can't see that happening. But if you're Xaverian and you're hearing this, you can't not prepare for that, right? Like, you can't at practice just be like, oh, well, guys, he's definitely not playing. They're lying over there. No, like, you got to at least prepare somehow that there's a possibility he could go into the game. So I think that's a whole nother dynamic that we haven't even really thought of. Like, what if I don't think he's going to come out there, but what if he does come out there? Because then if you're Xaverian, you're like, okay, guys, we're going with plan A. Plan B is in the dumpster. We're going plan A. Does that mean we do more zone? Do we do more man? What like for prep, you run different route concepts. That's a whole different offensive game plan than you would have run with John Boudreau at quarterback, who I actually, we've talked about this, Gage. I think it would be kind of cool if prep did win with him at quarterback, showing that it is like a culture thing there with somebody like Brian St. Pierre who can, build up his backup quarterback. And a lot of those kids also said he could be starting at majority of the schools around, especially on the North Shore. But he decided to stay, and he was okay with backing up Vargas. So that's one factor, though, that we haven't really considered, is does he ended up playing? And I do think, though, that running backs in this scenario are so important in this game. Because if for whatever reason you aren't able to get things going, I don't see that happening for Xaverian. Christian McIntyre, I don't think he hasn't dropped 100 on anybody this year. Like, I would like to actually know if there's a team he hasn't had 100 receiving yards. So, so that's very unlikely. But still, if you can get, Cicino was arguably a big X factor, definitely against CM, but he had a long touchdown against Springfield Central as well. And they also have a fullback, too. They still utilize the fullback at Xaverian. It's not completely dead. So run game is going to be so important in that game. The trenches are going to be so important. But I want to also credit Will Wood, because it seems like every year he's getting better and better and better. And the prep, that Xaverian is kind of really letting him take control of the offense and let him kind of air it out. Let's open up the offense more. And you saw it with Hasselbeck, and he was a junior. He was a much different player than he was his senior year. They didn't have him his sophomore year. I couldn't even imagine if he was at Xaverian all 3 years, and they really got to figure him out. So I'm excited, though, because I think I love the fact we get to see these two teams play again. There's, in terms of a New England rivalry, to me, this might be at the pinnacle, only behind Exeter High School and Winnicott in New Hampshire, but, I think
Exeter alum disclaimer over here.
in an unbiased point of view. But I'm excited that we get to see it again. It was it was a great game in 2023. And it's hard for me to formulate who exactly going to win. But I'm then again, I'm not also going to be the guy to pick against Zavarian when they're back-to-back state champs for a reason. Like going for a three-peat, I mean, that would be history. We talked about this in the offseason. I mean, the preseason, Gage. Like, this would be history. So why would anybody pick against Zavarian?
Right. And for me, there are two things that I'm thinking about when it comes to this game. The first thing, we mentioned Boudreaux and him sort of stepping into this role, and is Vargas going to play? Really? Like, are we sure? But the thing that really stuck out to me after the Central Catholic game, talking to him and talking to Coach St. Pierre, is like, one, if you're a quarterback at St. John's Prep, you couldn't be more prepared right now if you have Brian St. Pierre, who played quarterback at Boston College and in the NFL, in one ear, and you have Chris Vargas in your other ear, also contributing as a teammate. Because from what I understand through talking to Coach St. Pierre, is that Vargas has been incredibly involved as a teammate, in being there for Boudreaux and giving his own perspective. And obviously, you'd think, Boudreaux being a senior, and of course Vargas is a sophomore, albeit one of the best sophomore quarterbacks in the country, you might think like, oh, did I want the underclassmen telling me stuff, whatever. And Boudreaux said it after the game that Chris Vargas is one of the smartest, or one of the most football smart people he's ever met in his life. And he's saying that about, like underclassmen. He doesn't have to say that, he can just be like, oh, Chris has been, he's a good teammate. He went out of his way to say that Chris is one of the most football smart people he's ever met in his life. And this is like, an underclassman that we're talking about. And he's been able to sort of impart some of, his own thinking and helping John out. So you got St. Pierre here and you got Vargas here. You couldn't be more prepared if you're John Boudreaux. I think the quote that he had after the Central Catholic game was, with Coach St. Pierre, I basically have a quarterback dictionary in one hand. And now with Chris being so involved and helpful, I now basically have two. So that's one thing that, really interests me. I'd love to be like just a fly on the wall in that quarterback room with, those guys, and sort of how they break down the film and what they talk about. And then the other thing that jumps out to me, we haven't really talked about with Zavarian, is as it relates to McIntyre. You're right, Alex. I'd be hard pressed to find a game this year where he hasn't really just popped off and been an impact player. But we have to remember as well, for most of the year, they were without Dave Giovagato, who was committed to UMass. And coming into the year, what was expected was going to be the top target for Will Wood, and he misses a lot of, I think, most, if not all, the regular season, really, with an injury. And then comes back into the fray here now. And he's definitely been involved. I think he scored a touchdown. It was against Springfield Central in the semifinal game. And even if he's not scoring touchdowns in games, you need to account for number one. You need to know where he is. And he's going to be playing FBS football next year. Although McIntyre is definitely in the running for that Gatorade Player of the Year this year accolade, and has had all those yards, probably well over 1,000 at this point. Having Giovagato now in the mix for this postseason, that just gives them another boost. Like, I wouldn't want to say that, you don't forget about Dave Giovagato, but when he's not playing during the regular season and how well the offense was performing with McIntyre and Wood, that connection, you're like, oh, this is already one of the better offenses in the entire state. And then you just, okay, let's throw in, and it's like you're making a soup. Let's throw in a little dash of Giovagato here. It's like, oh, okay, all right. Okay, all right then. So that's another element and thing that kind of interests me, where no one's been able to double team McIntyre and take away that that seam, and where Wood likes to hit him for the long touchdowns. No one's been able to do that. But if you sell out and okay, we'll get safety help, okay, whatever we need to do, you're still letting Giovagato, be there. A healthy Dave Giovagato be there as well, a Division I football player. So it's going to be chess. Where's the rook going? Where are we moving the pawns? St. Pierre and Fenaro, we're going to be, trying to figure that out for 4 quarters. I'm trying to think. I mean, when it comes to this game, I'm going to put you two on the spot. Hopefully you like me after this. So who do you think is going to win? I'll throw it to you, Nate. What do we think is going to happen here?
I mean, we gotta make picks. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that in the Capitol as well. I think I'm gonna pick Prep just to zag, because the whole beat a team 3 times in a row. Zavarian's won now 3 of the last 4 meetings, won in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. That was on 6 days rest because it was a Wednesday. And this now you get a long time to prepare. And I think I'll lean towards that like prep brain trust, like you're saying, getting Boudreaux prepared, getting the chess pieces in the right places. Not that Zavarian's coaching staff is any small slough. I mean, they are fantastic in their own right. And they have pieces to move around as well. Yeah, it's definitely a problem to solve, like you're saying. I think, has anyone held Christian McIntyre down? Maybe Jackson Holmes in practice. It's that guy. That guy is really good shutdown corner, and he's on the Zavarian side as well. But prep kind of the sum of the parts on that defense. I've seen it, right. It shut down Will Watson in Springfield Central, shut out Springfield Central. And yes, they had Janelle Aguero on that team. They had some fantastic players. But they've got great guys on defense too. So I would lean towards the prep defense somehow pulling this one out, and their running game, which has been so prolific. And like I said, started to really get the wheels on the tracks down the stretch there in Thanksgiving.
What about you, Alex? What do you think?
I'll probably get some angry texts from people, but I can't not pick Zavarian. I can't, because I feel like it's kind of not actually, but just, whatever, hyperbole. It's disrespectful to pick against the team that's like, and like, here's the thing. I've picked against them before. I picked them, and I was right. Springfield Central beat them in the regular season, but I thought they probably would beat them in the playoffs too. And it's like, why do I keep doing that? I don't know. It's like this team knows how to win a big game. So I'm going to just kind of play it safe in a lot of ways. And it's like, and again, we get to these points. It's like, okay, well, they lost to Central Catholic. Is that the team that comes out? The team that played, couldn't beat Central Catholic. That was also a long time ago, Alex. That was a long time ago. And not only that, I do think that, and I've been an advocate of his now, and everybody knows but I'm a big believer in good luck stopping 21. Nobody's been able to do it. And especially with Shia Vagato back, like Gage, you were saying, that he adds a whole different element to where you can try to, double Christian, but you really can't. But he's been such a problem for everybody. And without question, I don't know about you guys, but I'd say the most unlikely Gatorade Player of the Year winner, because I think he does win it after this game, especially if they win it. I don't see how he can't win it. But, I mean, probably not the most unlikely, but I don't think anybody would have picked him in the preseason. Like, I don't think anybody would have picked him. And I just can't pick against him. I can't pick against Zavarian, who's been to that game now so many times. So I'm going to have to go with them. And hey, if I'm wrong, I'll just get some angry texts from some prep people, get some angry DMs from some prep people. It's not the first time and wouldn't be the last time. So I'm going to rock with Zavarian.
Got you. And I'm not going to leave you two out to dry. I feel like, Nate, as you were making your case, I was sort of scratching my chin and thinking like, he does, making some good points here. This is why you're Nate. But I feel like I got to go, just basically with what Alex was saying. I mean, no one's been able to stop Christian McIntyre. No one's been able to do it. And so that's, it's a difficult thing to pick against. And, not having, Chris Vargas in the fold these last few weeks, that also tips the scales a little bit. And that's no disrespect to John Boudreaux, because he's definitely met the moment these last few weeks. And has done, more than what he needs to do. And that St. John's Prep rushing attack, the Parent and Toribio, I mean, they were just like every play was a highlight play against Central Catholic in that state semifinal game. And I watched Toribio come up huge in that Springfield Central game to open the season. And that Wildcat, if they go Wildcat and Toribio is behind center, something, if you're a defense, something bad is probably going to happen. But when it comes to just the explosive plays, they can really flip a game on its head. Zavarian can with finding the ball or getting the ball to McIntyre, and that's not working, which more than likely or typically it does. You got Dave Giavagata right there. You got Rocco Sestito. He can run over people. Yeah, you can get it to the fullback. You can get it to Bryce Todd, the scat back, who can make a guy miss. The kid going to Boston College. How could we forget? One of the best edge rushers in the entire state. As a footnote, just throw that in. So it's there's just so much. But yeah, not to leave you guys out to dry. I guess I'm going to go with Zavarian as well. Gentlemen, I mean, I know the three of us, we could go for another hour, but I'm not going to do that to you. We've already gone pretty thoroughly here. So I want to say thank you to you two. Thank you to you, Alex. Thank you to you, Nate, for jumping in. If you don't already follow these two guys on social media, do so now. We got Alex Regrella from Recruiting Board. This guy's going to be running up and down the sidelines, doing videos from Gillette here on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So make sure to check out his YouTube at Recruiting Board. And obviously Nate Weitzer from the Boston Globe will also be at Gillette, taking care of business and enjoying the free food as well. So thank you so much to you two guys. And, I'll be seeing you two here in the next few days.
Great job, Gage.
Sounds good, guys. We'll take the underdog.
See you guys. Thank you so much to you two, to Nate and Alex. Once again, my name is Gage Nutter. This was a MassLive production, breaking down all 8 state championship games. Thank you so much if you've been watching here live, and if you're watching on the YouTube, thanks so much as well. With these 8 championship games, and when it comes to MassLive's coverage, we are covering all 8 state championship games: Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We got 2 on Thursday, 2 on Friday, 4 on Saturday. We will have stories from all 8 games. So check us out at masslive.highschoolsports.highschoolsports.com. Yeah, I think that's the URL. You can just Google MassLive as well, high school sports. But yeah, once again, my name is Gage Nutter. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you at